Today's program, the Canal era in Madison County. I got really interested in this years ago because near where I lived were some remnants of the canal, and that spurred me to want to know more. And so I started in on the process. The picture that you see here comes up again later in the program, and I will explain it, but that is a remnant of the Indiana Central Canal right here in Madison County. I'll explain it a little bit more about it later on. The whole idea of canals in Indiana was fostered by the Erie Canal in New York State. In 1825, the state of New York opened the Erie Canal, and it was so economically beneficial to the state of New York that other states began to look at that. This is pre-railroad times. So it was the latest way of getting around and moving goods and so forth, and it was very successful, very profitable for the state of New York that other states began to look at it. The Erie Canal basically ran from Albany, New York on the Hudson River across upper New York State, clear over to Buffalo where it dumped into Lake Erie. So if you had goods that you could get onto Lake Erie, you could follow that canal all the way to the Hudson River and the Hudson River all the way to New York City. That's a good deal. We had two canals in our county at two different times. You see the periods there when they were in existence, and we'll do both of them today. This is a quote from Governor James B. Ray to the Indiana legislature, a message that he wrote to them in December of 1826. Now remember, the Erie Canal opens the year before. On the construction of roads and canals, then, we must rely as the safest and most certain state policy to relieve our situation, place us among the first states in the Union, and change of hard times into an open acknowledgement of our contentedness. We must strike at the internal improvement of the state or form our minds to remain poor and unacquainted with each other, close quote. What he's talking about there is that the state had moved the capital from Corydon down near the Ohio River to the central part of the state. Well, that's great, except there was no way to get there. There was no way to get there. They chose Indianapolis because it was on two navigable streams, the White River and Fall Creek. And they joined there in what is in Indianapolis today. That was the choice, the reason for the choice. But there was no population there, there was no way to get there, and there was no way to have commerce. So this was his challenge to the legislature. We need to open up central Indiana, or we're going to just remain poor and unacquainted with each other. During the Central Canal era, there were three governors in Indiana. James Ray on the left, in the center is Noah Noble, and David Wallace on the right. They all three were instrumental in making our canal era happen. The Indiana Mammoth Internal Improvement Act, Governor Noah Noble urged upon the Indiana legislatures of 1831 to 34 the well-defined system of public improvements. The citizens of Indiana demanded the adoption of measures necessary to the development of the state's resources. Canals and railroads were being constructed in various parts of Indiana. A system of internal improvements was needed. The General Assembly of 1836 passes an act providing for the Board of Internal Improvements. Included were canals, railroads, vehicular roads, and improvement of the Wabash River. The Central Canal, commencing at the most suitable point on the Wabash and Erie Canal between Fort Wayne and Logansport, running thence to Muncietown, thence to Indianapolis, thence down the valley of the West Fork of White River to its junction with the East Fork of said river, and thence by the most practical route to Evansville and the Ohio River. There was an option suggested for them, and that was called the Pipe Creek lower route, or Pipe Creek route. That's the one they eventually chose to come through central Indiana. In that case, a feeder shall commence at Muncietown and connect with Canal at some convenient point. The concept. The Central Canal was intended to satisfy the central part of the state, including Indianapolis, It was the largest and longest of all the projects, 294 miles. In 1835, engineers were employed to locate the proposed route. So, in 1835, engineers were active in this area, trying to select the right route for the canal to happen. And it was to link the Wabash and Erie canals at both ends of that canal. I'll show you a map to explain that for you. From Peru, there was to be a summit-level canal through Marion, Summitville, and Alexandria to Anderson. That was the alternate route. That's the one they ended up with. From Anderson, it was to follow the West Fork of the White River through Noblesville, Indianapolis, and Martinsville, and join the Wabash and Erie at a crosscut at Worthington, Indiana. And then there was to be a branch from Anderson to Muncie. That's the mystery branch, and I'm going to have fun later on revealing that to you. $10 million was appropriated in the 1836 Act. Now, you think $10 million in 1836 in Indiana, that's a wad of dough. $3.5 million of the $10 million was appropriated for the Central Canal. Most important of the improvements because it would traverse the landlocked center of the state and connect Indiana's capital to the world. During 1836-37, 45 miles were put under contract. Construction took place in many different areas simultaneously. My research has turned up some 87 different contractors that were digging the canal, separate from one another, and they were digging here, 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 and here. Hopefully the idea they would all link together was the plan. That's what the surveyor was for. But they would contract for whatever section length they thought they could handle, sometimes as much as a mile, sometimes a shorter distance. Again, depending on manpower, because it was manpower that dug the canals. There were three divisions of the canal, the northern section, which we were in, the southern, and then the Indianapolis division. On June 27, 1839, the canal was watered at Broad Ripple. Now, watered means water was let into it at Broad Ripple in Indianapolis. There was limited digging in our northern division where we're located. Small contractors with short stretches finished first. Evident today in Madison and Hamilton counties is the canal evidence. This is a cross-section of what a canal looked like. It was 40 feet wide at the top, 8 feet wide at the bottom with 4 feet of water in it. And there were two sides to it, an 8-foot wide berm and a 10-foot wide towpath. The towpath was there for any kind of animal power to pull the canal boat through the water, because the water didn't flow, it had to be pulled. If you've been to Metamora and been on that canal boat ride down there, there's horses that pull that canal boat. Same thing here. So the towpath was where the animals would walk, and it was always on the side of the water source. You had to have water close by, a river, a stream, or so forth, and so the towpath was always on the side nearest the water. Originally, this is a conception of the canal systems of Indiana and Ohio. The original canal that we were going to see here in the central part of the state came off of the Wabash and Erie Canal here at Peru, down through Marion, down through Noblesville, Broad Ripple, Indianapolis, all the way down Martinsville, Spencer to Worthington, where it would join up with the southern extension of the Wabash and Erie Canal, and then make its way all the way down to Evansville. Going the other direction, it made its way all the way to Lake Erie. So if you think about it, and you're a merchant, and you have goods that you're selling or making along that canal route, you can have markets that take you, as I showed you earlier, to New York City, or you can have markets that take you down the Ohio to the Mississippi to New Orleans. So you could connect New York City and New Orleans. So this was a big, big boom for people in the mercantile business. What happened was that this route was one that was not chosen. Instead, they chose this one that came down through Anderson and then on down this way. with a link over here to Muncie. And then we were talking about the Whitewater Canal at Metamora. It made its way down the Whitewater River to the Great Miami and to Cincinnati, and it went north. This shows it stopping in Hagerstown. I don't know if you've been to Hagerstown, the Guy Willivers, but over there they have a canal street in Hagerstown. That canal street is the route of the canal. It stopped in Hagerstown, but it was originally planned to go all the way to Muncie, and then there would be a linking canal linking Anderson and Muncie. So if you conceive this, you can see where Anderson had the potential to be the central city in the state, because the only way to get commerce was canals, and the two major canals would connect here in Anderson. It would be like Indianapolis with all the interstates that come into Indianapolis. Anderson would have been a similar situation with the canals coming in here. So the idea behind canals coming to Anderson made Anderson explode in population, and we'll talk about that later on. Now to the Central Canal. Today we find remnants of it between 800 and 600 north east of State Road 9, between 600 and 500 north east of Alexandria Pike to a drainage pond above the 500 north. It's also found between 500 north and 400 north east of Ellick Pike, east of Rangeline Road and south of East 10th Street, the south side of White River behind Western Hills, at 8162 West 8th Street Road. I'll take you out there and show you that. In fact, I'm going to show all of these to you. The first part where the canal first appears today, this is 128. Alexandria is here. This is State Road 9, and this is 800 north. And you see that line? That's the canal. But you can see the remnants of it here. This is 800, this is 700. And if you go to 800 north and you come just off of at the intersection of 128 and State Road 9 and come over about an eighth of a mile and park, this is what you're going to see. Only it doesn't look that good. Today, I took this a number of years ago, and today there's lots of trees growing up in there. There's no way on God's green earth you'd ever know that was a canal, but it is. From 700 north, where 700 north crosses, again you see that it's almost like somebody took a pencil and drew down through there, straight as a die. Then from 650 north, east of State Road 9, you see the canal coming in here. Here's where it crosses, 650 north. And at 600 north, you see the canal coming in here. Here's Linwood. And if you go to this bridge right here, this short bridge over the canal, east of State Road 9 on 600 north, this is what you see if you look north. And again, as the gentleman pointed out, it's nothing more today than a drainage ditch. But originally it was 40 feet wide and 28 feet at the base, 40 feet wide at the top. That's looking north from that bridge. If you just turn around and you look the other direction, well, that's looking north, I beg your pardon. That's looking south from there. Again, it's all filled in, as the gentleman says. There's just a little trickle of water that runs through there. Several years ago, a good friend of mine lived at 5600 Alexandria Pike. I had written an article for the newspaper about this story. He called me, he says, "Hey, come on out, I want to show you my property." So I drove out to 5600 north. Here comes the canal in behind his house. And we went out and we looked at what's left of the canal behind his home. You can see he mows his yard, doesn't mow the other side. He doesn't live there anymore, so I can say that. You can see a little bit of rippling of the water. There's some movement in it, but it's ever so slight, ever so slight. It joins Little Killbuck Creek above 500 north. Now, here comes the canal that we just saw, and it comes into this This is called Prosperity Lake. And joining it is Little Killbuck Creek, which adds water to this before it then leaves this area and continues on south. So this is Prosperity Lake. There are home sites on it. About this same time, I got another phone call. Dale Cook, maybe you know Dale Cook. Dale said, Steve, you got to come out to my property. I want you to see the canal on my property. And by the way, I've invited some of the officers of the Indiana Canal Society to come out and join you, and we'll take a tour of my property. And I said, great, I would love to do that. So we did that. Dale lives at 4451 North, 100 East, and we made our visit April 22nd, 2010, so 12 years ago. And this is Dale's property. We had to walk back, and in this tree line is the canal. We are on the towpath. Now, the engineers took advantage, and they always took advantage of natural terrain. Less digging. If you just dig out this part here, you've already got one side of the canal there from natural terrain, so you just have to bank up this side. Look how high I am looking down into the bed of the canal. Now, in a few minutes, we'll go back around. I'll take you down inside and show you that shot up. That is the towpath behind his property, about 10 feet wide. More of it. That is in the, I call it the bed of the canal, but I was quickly corrected by the Canal Society people who said, don't, no, that's the prism. That's the canal prism, is what that's officially known as, the canal prism. So, henceforth, we're going to be looking at the canal prism. There's where I was standing when I took the picture of the bed. You can see how deep that is. Again, in the canal prism. Again, the towpath. And it ends here at 400 North, with one exception. The canal comes down, this is a drive that comes down from a home up here, which follows the old canal bed. If I turn around and I take a picture this way, you see this. This is another extension of the canal, but you can see now it has all been torn up. People have moved in, built on it, and so forth. So the only thing you can see of the canal bed is the towpath. That runs for a short distance, and then it stops. This is interesting. This is Payless Cross Street. And this is the gravel pit just south of it. Everybody with me? That canal was to come in, did come in, because going across this property right here, which is now the gravel pit, that used to be owned by some people by the name of McCullough. McCulloughs owned that property. In fact, on their property were natural gas wells at one time. But Neil, who's just passed on not too long ago, we talked a lot. He lived in Arizona. This was his family farm. And he said, Steve, I remember as a kid, the canal passing through our farm, or the canal bed, and there was a tree that had fallen across it. And he says, so you could walk across the fallen tree from one side to the other. And the kids made a contest out of it, how quickly you could run across that tree, even ride your bike. I said, did you ever fall in? He said, more than once, more than once. But the idea was that the canal would then come through this area and join this. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Alexandria Pike. Alexandria Pike. But before it was a turnpike, it was to be the canal. And that would make its way all the way down to West Maplewood Cemetery, there at Grand Avenue, and dump into the river. When it dumped into the river, here's Athletic Park. It would dumped into the river, and then you would follow the course of the river to about, do you remember the Delaware Street Bridge? The Singing Bridge? Old county histories tell me that about where that bridge was a small dam in White River to back up water to be a reserve, because the canal then would enter the land again and make its way along the left bank of White River as it made its way through Anderson. So the rock dam was there to be a water supply for the canal. Anyway, then the canal would make its way along the left bank. Now, I know all of you are sitting there right now and you're saying, now, wait a minute, Steve. Wait a minute. You're telling me that the canal bed would have followed Alexandria Pike to where it came to the river. And those of you that are familiar with the area know right now that the river is way below Grand Avenue there, isn't it? So how were they going to get a boat in a canal down to the river? And if the boat was going the other way, how would they get it up that hill? They had a way, and I will show you that later on. This is from Alexandria Pike to River Forest. You see the White River. It just followed the left bank of the river out here to this River Forest area. You all know where River Forest is off of West 8th Street? Okay. From there, it would make its way past the old Moss Island Mill. Again, here's Moss Island Road. Here's Romine Road. Here is 8th Street Road. And the canal would again hug the left bank of White River. But right here is where the Moss Island Mill was located. How many remember heard of the Moss Island Mill? Well, there it is. And when you come back in June, which I know you're going to leave, I know you're going to do that, this is part of my Tale of Two Mills story, will be the Moss Island Mill. But very quickly, a man by the name of Joseph Mullinex in 1836 built that mill. And his idea was, if my mill is here and the Central Canal is right across the river from where my mill is, then all of the grain that I grind in that mill, I can put on flatboats and I can send it as far this way as New York City or as far this way as New Orleans. So he had a great idea, a great place to put his mill, because he could capitalize on the presence of the Central Canal being right across from his mill. Behind Western Hills, which is the housing addition on the north side of 8th Street, just before you get to River Forest, if you go down to the river, you can find the remnant of the Central Canal there. Again, the builders took advantage of that bluff that runs along White River, where Western Hills and River Forest set today above the river, hillside down to the riverbed. They built along that flat area between the river and the bluff, taking advantage of it. And this would have been the towpath. And you can see behind Western Hills, my picture is showing you that area. Again, this is the natural bluff. This is what was dug. And here comes the Central Canal through that area. Same thing again. And again. And behind River Forest, which just is the next addition west of Western Hills, same thing. Again, the bed of the canal. My pictures probably don't do it justice. Believe me, if you're there, it's as obvious as can be what it is. The footprint of the canal is very, very apparent. And this is an excellent time of year. I shot these in October. It's an excellent time to photograph because the foliage is down pretty well. And you can still see the area as it is. Now, about the same time that I was getting these phone calls after I had written my article on the Central Canal, I got another phone call. This man's name was Jim Cunningham, and Jim lives right here at 8162 West 8th Street Road, and I went to see him on April 15th, 2010. And when he called, he says, I don't know where all you've been, to see the canal remnants. But he says, you haven't seen anything like what I have. I've got the best canal remnants in Madison County. So I went out there. What I want to show you is in the tree line, very faint, is a line that goes back like this off of the canal. I'll explain that to you in just a moment, or show it to you. So we got in his gator, and away we went. He's driving and I'm bouncing. And this is the central canal bed behind his property. And then we come up to this. I said, stop. Obviously, stop. We had heavy rains. And White River, which is just over here, had backed up a little bit and backed into the central canal, giving the appearance of what it looked like when it was a canal. I had to have that picture. I thought that was so neat. We continued on, and we came to this. This is that line that I showed you on the earlier aerial shot. The canal is here. This is a obviously dug out area, and behind me, not 5 feet, is White River, and I'm only maybe 2 or 3 feet above the river at that point. That's why you see the water in there. I said, what's that? He said, I don't know. He said, I had the Canal Society folks, Indiana Canal Society folks down. They've never seen anything like that. But he says, obviously, it was dug for a reason. Really, I still don't know, other than maybe if 2 canal boats were passing, one could get off into here and let the other pass. I don't know. That's the only explanation I can give you, but it's very clearly man-made. Back out into the canal bed again, back to that dug. When you think about it, how many shovels and men did it take to dig this? I was fascinated with it, took numerous pictures, as you can see. We then left that area, and the canal bed extends west towards Perkinsville in this tree line. So we got in the gator and we went out along the edge of the tree line, out here to the end of it, where we took this picture where the canal bed kind of just dries up, because the farmers have worked the fields over the years and the canal's gone. But there was a friendly bovine in there, and at that end of the canal was more pictures that I took of water standing in the canal bed. And some friends joined and they were eyeing us over. They hadn't made a move towards us yet, but Jim suggested we move, so we did. Back behind his property again. That's his home. Several years after that, I was working on the hydraulic canal, which you're going to see next. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine who lives here. He said, why don't you come out? And he says, I want to show you the hydraulic canal remnant on my property. Okay, so we made an arrangement, and I went out there to see him. Parked in his driveway here, and then we began to walk along. This is the hydraulic canal, that faint outline. As we're walking along there, and I'm taking pictures, he references the canal over there. Well, the first time he said it, I just dismissed it. We went on a little bit further, and he said, that other canal over there. And I stopped him and I said, the other canal? What are you talking about? He says, there's another canal a couple 100 yards from where we are. And I'm scratching my head because And as you'll learn, the hydraulic canal hugged the bluff that goes along the river because its purpose was to be a flow of water to operate mills. It was not to be canal boats. It was to be a flow of water. And I'll explain that to you in a minute here how it works. So if there's another canal over here, this is in the flat area. It wouldn't work. The water wouldn't move. It's just flat. So I said, well, when we get done here, show me that canal, will you? And he said, sure. So we got done. We got up into this area, came back, and then we started walking across this area. And I stepped into that, and my jaw dropped. Because immediately I recognized that that's that feeder branch that was to run between Anderson and Muncie. There is no record of that anywhere. When the work was done and the men turned in all of their work, they did not turn this in that they had dug here. Nobody knew this was here until he pointed it out to me. But as soon as I stepped into it, and I got one more picture of it that's really good. You're seeing about the total distance of it. I'd say maybe 100 yards or so, roughly speaking. The river is right over here. Over the years, this being a floodplain, this is flooded many times, and it has silted in. So what was originally 6 feet deep is now maybe only 2 feet deep. But you see the towpath and the berm here, and that's all silted in. But that's the old feeder branch that was to connect Anderson and Muncie. That was quite a find. I turned to him and I said, you are the only property owner in Indiana, the only property owner in Indiana that has 2 different canals on your property. Nobody else can make that claim. Well, it was a financial failure. The Panic of 1837, inefficiency, and corruption brought failure to it. The Panic of 1837 began in Europe, spread to the United States, and creditors who had loaned money out began to call the notes in. And the state of Indiana had borrowed the $10 million from creditors. And the creditors said, we want our money. The state of Indiana said, we don't have it. So the state of Indiana declared bankruptcy. Its first and only time. That story will continue here in just a moment. August of 1839, all of the improvement projects halted due to Indiana's $18 million indebtedness. Now, if you remember, they appropriated $10 million. And at this point, they borrowed $18 million, and they weren't even done. An 11-mile section through Indianapolis was the only part of the Central Canal that was ever completed. 70 miles of partially finished canal between Alexandria and Martinsville, that's all that was completed. Indiana's cost for all the canals was $19,914,400. Only 231 miles were completed. And in 1851, Indiana developed a new constitution to put restrictions on debt. And that's the reason for it. We went into debt in 1837. We had to declare bankruptcy. And so the legislators said, nope, that's not going to happen again. So Indiana now has a law. It's law. You can't go in debt. You can't borrow money in Indiana. You can't borrow more than what you can pay. That's a good thing for us as Hoosiers, because our state government cannot spend more than it takes in. That's a novel idea. In 1851, that $19 million indebtedness sold for $2,435. That's all they got out of it. To try to settle up with private individuals that had been investors in it. Not much return for your money. In 1871, then, they sold it to the Indianapolis Water Works Company for $200,000, so they got a little bit of their money back. In 1840, the Indiana legislature required that all of the canal builders file a completion report. What did you do? 10 miles from Alexandria and Anderson was planned. Work was done on half of that distance, 5 miles, and I've just taken you earlier over that 5-mile stretch. Below Anderson for 8 miles, only a third of it was done, and I've taken you through most of that. From there to Noblesville, 15 miles was planned, only a fourth of it was done. From there to Broad Ripple, 13 miles, nothing was done. From there through Indianapolis, 9 miles, and that was complete. And we'll visit that here in a little bit. From there to Waverly, 16 miles, complete except for the locks. From there to 4 miles above Martinsville, 11 miles were planned, a third was done. 75 miles planned, 41 miles complete. No mention of the Anderson to Muncie feeder branch that I showed you earlier. Nowhere, I've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, nowhere does it mention the construction of that feeder branch. This is a map that I drew of Madison County. The dark blue line shows you the route of the Central Canal in Madison County, and where it is in red is where there are sections of it that you can see today, and I've shown those to you. The hydraulic canal. Anderson's Hydraulic Canal Company organized December the 19th, 1868. $64,000 in capital stock was raised from the private sector here. $20,000 additional came from the city of Anderson. The board of directors were Peter Summan, William Krim, H.J. Blackledge, N.C. McCullough, George Nickel, Samuel Hudgel, and James Hazlitt. Those men were the investors, and they all stood to reap a benefit from it because they were all property owners along the route of the hydraulic canal. Well, you can see some names there that are quite familiar to you. We mentioned McCullough, Nickel, Hudgel we just mentioned. Hazlitt was a mayor of Anderson. The concept was to create a flow of water that would be a source of power. Mills and factories located along its path will be powered by hydraulic power provided by the water's flow. In other words, it was not for boat travel, it was a flow of water that would power mills. You see a flow rate of 27,000 cubic feet of water per minute is what the engineers estimated. 27,000 cubic feet of water per minute. That's a pretty good flow of water. It would run 160 run of burrs of 120 horsepower each. A burr is nothing more than a grinding wheel, can be used for various purposes, one of which would be to grind meal at 120 horsepower each. That would be the development of that water power turned into horsepower. The canal was to begin opposite Daleville on the north bank of White River and flow the general course of the river for 8 miles to Anderson. The elevation at Daleville is 44 feet higher than Anderson. That's why people in Daleville look down on Anderson today, in case you were curious. But that 44-foot drop in elevation would be enough to create a strong water flow. They would use the bed of the old feeder canal begun in 1838 was the concept, but we know that that feeder canal, where it was located, would not work because it's on flat ground. But that was in the concept that I found to use that. Estimated it would operate 10 flouring and 5 carding mills, which would require the employment of 1,000 people here in Anderson. You don't think the city of Anderson got excited about that? That's why the city of Anderson put up $20,000. If they can make this happen, you can bring an extra 1,000 employees in here. That's a big deal today if you can bring 1,000 people in here to work. It began in 1869. John Irwin of Hamilton, Ohio, was the engineer and superintendent. Andrew Myers from Goshen and James Doherty of Anderson were contracted to do the lower end where the mills were to be located, and it would be dug completely by hand. 40 feet wide at the top, 26 feet wide at the bottom. The water depth would be 4 feet. They would use a slack water pool necessary at the beginning. A dam would be built across the river north of Daleville. A wicket would regulate the flow of water entering the canal. Wicket's nothing more than just a movable gate. A movable gate to either close off the water flow or open it up and let the water flow go in. A reservoir would be built for use during periods of low water because, again, you're depending upon White River. Well, what happens to White River in August and September in this area? We don't have rains. Water level goes down. So you had to have an alternate source of water. They planned for that. Engineering and financial failure. In 1874, on July 4th, the canal was watered. It was a big deal. Big deal. Huge crowds went out to the site where the dam was located, which I'll take you there in just a moment, to watch the water come into the canal to begin the process of all of this prosperity that it would bring to Anderson. In fact, Main Street, today's Main Street in Anderson, down near 5th Street, was all just vacant. Nothing was there. But in preparation for this, businesses sprang up in that area. Big businesses sprang up in that area because they thought that this was going to bring commerce to the area, and they wanted to be at that portion of Anderson where they would benefit the most from it, which would have been on Main Street from 5th to the river. Well, right after they let the water in, immediately the banks gave way in numerous spots. So they stopped the flow of water. They made some repairs. They watered it again with the same result. And so, frustrated by failure and discouraged by monetary losses, the project was abandoned with an $80,000 loss. The city was on the hook for $20,000 and the investors for another $64,000. I'm not an engineer, don't pretend to be one, but if they built the banks out of that canal, or the one side of it just out of dirt, well, what is going to happen when water rushes over dirt? To me, you got to put some kind of rocks in there or something solid to hold that dirt in place, or do something. Again, I'm not an engineer, but they weren't either, apparently. The property was sold by our sheriff, Edward Rogers, to satisfy the judgments against the company. This is an 1876 plat map of our county, and it shows you White River as it comes in from Delaware County. This would be our county line, be 500 east for those of you who live out that way. And the river makes its way all the way to Anderson. The hydraulic canal is this dark line that you see running along beside it. And you see some familiar names: Udgel, Blackledge, some of them that you saw earlier. Traces of the hydraulic canal today: there's the feeder dam north of Daleville, the crosscut on the river bend north of Daleville, a reservoir at Madison County Road 500 East. Old Emerald Glen has a remnant. The area between Lindbergh Road and State Road 32 on the river's right bank, across from Mounds Park on East 10th Street, dead end. Linwood Drive, now we're behind Panorama. Lenox Street, Brookline Street, Grand Avenue, a lock excavation on the east side of Milton Avenue, south of High Street, was visible until 3rd Street was opened up to Anderson University. And I don't have a photograph of that. I was curious, where was this dam that they spoke about? So I got out my friend Google Earth, and I began at Anderson, and I began to go upriver just looking for whatever I could see. And I got in here, and all of a sudden I saw a straight line. That's man-made, I said. I got to go see that. So I got in the car, and I drove over to, I'm now in Delaware County, and I drove over to this man's property right here. He happened to be out on his front porch, pulled up in his driveway, got out, walked up, introduced myself, and I said, sir, I told him who I was, and I said, I'm interested in getting down to the river. Is that your property? He said, it is. I said, would you mind if I went down there? And he said, that's quite all right, just stay out of the beans. Okay. So he said, now you can drive. He says, go up here and you can drive most of the way, but then you got to park and then you got to walk. Okay. So that's exactly what I did. And when I got over to this area right here, this is what I saw. Now that doesn't mean anything to you, but that caught my eye. See it? That's embedded in the bank. That's not a fallen tree. That's embedded in the bank. See it? There it comes out. Because it's got a bolt in it. The bolt goes down into bedrock. That's the anchor, one of the anchors for the dam. And when you look out into the river, again, I took these in August. If you want to photograph the river, August is the time to do it because the water level's down, it's clear, and you can see all kinds of neat things in the river. And see what I saw? This would be the bed of the dam that they built up on. What kind of dam was it? They don't tell us, but popular at that time in the United States were what was called crib dams. Simple construction, simple construction. You had logs, so many feet apart, however wide you wanted to make your dam, that were all tied together, and you filled them with stone. You filled them with stone that you gathered from wherever. And that would allow the water to flow through the stone, but it would restrict it enough that it would cause slack water to form above the dam. And it was that slack water that they could tap into and open the wicket gate and allow the water to go into the canal. More pictures that I took there. I was so tickled with myself. I don't know how else to say it. I was tickled with myself that I had figured that out, guessed correctly, and had walked up and found it. Things like that, as my wife will tell you, they don't normally fall that way. But anyway, I was so tickled with myself that I found it. I took a lot of pictures. And as I was standing there then, looking at that, I thought, well, let's turn around and look. So when I turned around from here, that's what I saw. There's the canal taking off from the slackwater area by the river. Again, it's silted in. It would have been a lot deeper than that. And again, remember, we're 44 feet above Daleville at that point. So it begins to make its trip to Anderson, descending at a rather rapid rate. More of that canal. I called it the crosscut canal because you remember on that Google Earth shot I showed you that straight line looked like a pencil drawing. That's man-made. There it peters out. While I was there, I ran into a couple friends. That's about as close as I could get to them and the way they went. Now I'm at County Line Road, between 500 East. The west side is Madison County. The east side is Delaware County. I'm just north of the White River Bridge, and I'm looking in Delaware County. And here comes that canal bed. And I'll bet that looks familiar to you, even though we're not behind Panorama Heights. But but it does look familiar. I'll bet it does. Here is the bridge, County Road 500. Here comes the canal. You see this large body of water here? That's a farm pond, spring fed, because we're in the area of an area that was known at one time as Bubbling Springs. The water table is high, so you don't have to go very far to strike water. And this is a man-made reservoir. And how do I know that? Because one of our former members of the Historical Society, his grandfather, helped dig that. And he told him that was to be the reservoir, the water supply for the hydraulic canal when water levels got low. And it would fill real quickly because of the high water table in that area. I took pictures of it. I was at a meeting, and after the meeting, I was doing presentation. After presentation, this lady came up and she said, "Mr. Jackson," she says, "I think I've got some bad news for you." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well," she says, "my family owns that property." And she said, well, she said, "I hate to tell you," but she says, "my sister had the wall cut to drain it." And I said, "Oh, no." And she said, "Yes, it looks like that. Because over here is White River. Her sister did not like it there for some reason, and she made a cut in the wall of it, and it drained it all out. And there it is. Between 400 East and 500, which 500 is where we are right now at the reservoir, then the canal hugs the river, the bluff that's on the right bank of the river between 500 and 400. And then between 300 and 500 is a little bit bigger view of it as it makes its way, and here is the Anderson Airport. And it makes its way through Emerald Glen. And where it makes its way through Emerald Glen, if you know Lindbergh Road, turns here at the river and becomes 300 East, going up to eventually to Hillbuck Grade School, way up here. But then this takes you in the back way to Chesterfield. This property that sits here on the corner in his backyard is the hydraulic canal. I've tried 2 different times to photograph that, not satisfied with either photograph, but I'll show them to you. I photographed it here, and then I came back in the wintertime to photograph it. It's just not one of those places that I'm able to photograph and show you to my satisfaction what it looks like. Then as you cross Lindbergh Road, making your way over here to State Road 32, Anderson Airport, the hydraulic canal hugs the riverbank all the way along here. And it looks like, in places, looks like this. I took this picture from the State Road 32 bridge. In other words, I was standing here shooting at this area right here, and that's what it looks like. When you cross the bridge, continuing south to from East 10th Street to State Road 32, this is East 10th Street, and here's State Road 32. The hydraulic canal is in this area, and boy, is it rough. That's rough going. Steep banks, wild terrain, not a place that you'd want to take a Sunday stroll, believe me. But I did get in there. I did take these pictures. Again, they used the right bank of the river, of the natural bluff, and just dug this side, and this was the hydraulic canal path. South side of East 10th Street is this area right here, and I'm really pleased. Red Tail Land Conservancy. Any of you familiar with Red Tail Land Conservancy? They buy up properties to conserve. They came to me and they said, we're looking at buying a property in Madison County. It will be our first purchase in Madison County to preserve some property. And we're looking at this property right here. is there any history associated with that property? And I said, there's a lot of history associated with that property. Like what? They said. Well, I said, for instance, there's a canal that runs through there. Oh, boy, did that get their eyes popping. They said, a canal? I said, yes. And I told them the story of the hydraulic canal. They purchased the property. They have given the property a name. It's called the Hidden Canal Nature Preserve. They will be clearing it out this year. What they plan to do is make it where we, the public, can go down in there and walk around, enjoy the nature preserve, and to see the canal as it is. So that's coming. I think, I'm not sure how many acres they bought, but it was a sizable purchase. This is what that ground looks like when I was in there taking pictures. This was about 10 years before they had me out there again, and they wanted to know if I wanted to go down in there and see it again. I said, nope, I've seen it once. I've seen it once, that's enough. It's wild, but it's neat. You can see the hand-dug banks that are along there. From Linwood Drive to Scatterfield Road, here's Panorama Heights. That canal came in along the riverbed. Here's the Shrine Club, right behind the Shrine Club, and up and across Scatterfield Road. At Linwood Drive, there's a cul-de-sac. Linwood Drive ends in a cul-de-sac. If you stand in that cul-de-sac, which I am, there is the embankment for the hydraulic canal. That's the embankment for the hydraulic, passed right through there. It was also the site of a religious group of people by the name of Moravians, who had a missionary station there from 1801 to 1806, where they came to convert the Delaware who lived here to Christianity. They were successful in a small way. Those Delaware came to live with them and die of old age. They buried them in this area somewhere in what the Moravians called God's Acre, which is the name that they named their cemeteries. All Moravian cemeteries are called God's Acre. In the late 1860s, when they were digging, I have found reports where they uncovered bones. Well, today, Marty, if you uncover bones, that stops everything, doesn't it? But in the 1870s, that didn't stop anything, the way it was. But I know full well that they hit that old cemetery. So years ago, when they were wanting to put the nature preserve trail through this area, I was contacted by the state to give a historical okay to this area, and I did, except I said, if you do any digging in that area, you've got to be aware that there were bones there at one time. Whether they're there now, I don't know, or exactly where, but I said, if you do any construction work, you have to be aware that that's a possibility. This is behind Lenox Street. Lenox Street runs right along by the Shrine Club. And if you go down to Lenox Street, where it makes a turn, because it can't go down to the river, and look to your right, you see a remnant of the old canal in this area. And at Brookline. Now, you got to walk on private property to see that one, but it's behind a home there on Brookline. I love this photograph. This is the bridge over White River on Scatterfield Road when it was first put in. That would be about 48, I think, something like that. At that time, the river had an oxbow in it. They wanted to build this bridge. They wanted to bridge the river there and open up Scatterfield Road. But to do that, that would have been a tremendously long bridge. So what do? You get a hold of the Army Corps of Engineers, and you cut a new channel through the river. Then you can build a shorter bridge. This is the Pittsford Ditch that still flows into the river today. But what I wanted to show you was the hydraulic canal. This is Panorama Heights in the future. And that canal flows along here and then this way down past the Devil's Backbone, another geological feature here in Anderson. Interesting feature. Now, I bet you never thought of this. When the canal came in along the river about here, the junction point for the river was here. But what they did was they cut across through Park Place. If you notice in Park Place, all the streets are on a north, south, east, west grid, except one, Grand Avenue. And Grand Avenue is here, and that's the path of the hydraulic canal. This is Grand Avenue at its beginning and at its terminus. When the canal failed, it was there. And the kids who grew up in Park Place loved it because it was a place to play. It would fill with the winter, it would fill with water in the fall and freeze in the winter. It was an ice skater's delight. In the summertime, there were swings and so forth in the area, so it was a great playground for kids. But when they developed Park Place, they needed a road in there, and so they filled it in and they paved it. And today it's our Grand Avenue as it makes its way across Park Place. Now, to how were they going to get in the river? Both for the hydraulic canal that would dump into the river at that point, and for the central canal that was going to come down Alexandria Pike, you had to build locks. They were planned, and they would be called step locks. This happens to be at Lockport, New York, for the Erie Canal. You understand how locks work. You're lowered and you're raised from one level to the other. That's what they would have done. That's what they would have done. They didn't do it because they didn't get that far. And over on the hydraulic canal, that's what they were going to do. Rather than have all that volume of water just pouring into White River over the bank, you needed to slow it down. And they would have slowed it down this way. A map that one of the fellows up at the Historical Society, Dick Bowman by his name, is his name. He drew this for us. The red line shows the hydraulic canal path. Again, the red line here, the red line indicating where there is remnants, and then the blue line where it's been obliterated, development, housing development has wiped it out as it makes its way to White River. Several communities sprang up as a result of the canal construction in Madison County. Speculation. Hamilton, out at 8th Street Road and 600 West. Hamilton was a canal diggers' place, first of all, where the canal diggers lived for a while, and then it sprang up and became a community. It formed in 1836. The city of Alexandria is there today because of speculation as the Central Canal would pass through there. William Connor Prairie, and a man by the name of Stevenson opened stores up there and bought land on the speculation that Alexandria would lie right on that canal. Pittsburgh or Prosperity in 1838 here in Madison County. Victoria was a town platted in 1838. I'll take you there. You know where that's at, okay. Mount Pleasant and Rockport, 6 communities in Madison County, all can claim their birth because they were speculative as canal towns. Where were they? Well, of course, we know Alexandria is here. We know Prosperity is here. We know Mount Pleasant is here. We know Victoria is here. Rockport is here, and here is Hamilton. The route of the canal, the Central Canal. The site of Mount Pleasant today is Bethany Point Nursing Home. That's the site of Mount Pleasant. The site of Victoria is West Maplewood Cemetery. And in fact, a gentleman bought that ground, had it platted, built a cabin on it. He was all set to go. He was going to sell those other lots because it was right on Alexandria Pike, right where the canal would flow. Rockport is out west of town. Those of you who remember Skatemore, remember Skatemore? Anyway, Rockport was a canal town. Canal workers lived there and built the canal through that area. Waybill that was out for laborers trying to advertise. These ended up on the East Coast. And as ships would come in from Europe, men were handed these, enticing them to come here to dig. Although most were single men, whole families also arrived from the eastern cities where canal recruiters had advertised for laborers. The immigrants from rural Ireland were being shut out of the rapidly growing factories in the northeast, and they were relegated to the lowest paying jobs. Canal work gave them a chance to earn wages about equivalent to factory jobs, or $10 a month in 1832 and up to $13 a month by 1837. They were often desperate to seek a better life elsewhere. Some looked down on the predominantly Catholic Irish because of their faith, and even some of their own faith, including the Catholic priests, who were mostly French-born, did not think highly of the Irish. The Reverend Stephen Bowden, who worked among the canal workers, characterized them as, quote, the lower class of the Irish, close quote, who were, quote, too fond of drinking. The rivalry between the Catholic and the Protestant gangs didn't improve the reputation of the Irish. Pitched battles had broken out on other canal projects between the Catholic Corkians and the Ulster-bred Fardowns, who were the Protestants. Workers lived in huts and shanties east of town along the construction site, Park Place. Its original name was Scabby Hollow. Scabby Hollow, because it was nothing but shanties of Irish canal workers. They frequented a tavern built of logs at the southeast corner of 9th and Central. So let your mind's eye go to 9th and Central. I think that's Workforce One occupies that ground today. But there was a tavern there, a log tavern. The proprietor was an Irishman named Federer, who boasted he had the best old rye on White River. Probably had the only rye on White River. A fight in the tavern between an Orangeman and an Irish Catholic led to a riot in town between the two groups. Word went out that a fight had broken out in Mr. Federer's tavern, and so the Irish Catholic canal workers waded White River. There was no bridge. Waded White River with billy clubs in hand and whatever else, and coming from the other side of town were the townies. News spread, and every man in town who owned a rifle or shotgun went to the scene and put down the riot. In 1837, the first Catholic Mass in Anderson was held at Mr. Federer's tavern. You see, the Irish who lived here had spiritual needs, obviously. And so they requested of the Archdiocese, who was then in Fort Wayne, to send a priest to Anderson to administer to them. And so the first Catholic priest arrived here in 1837, and he stayed. And he established what we know today as St. Mary's Church, a whole nother story. I'd say that boat's overcrowded, wouldn't you? The Central Canal today runs through Indianapolis. Our state legislators, in their infinite wisdom, demanded that the canal be built right by the State House so they could look out the window and watch the progress. That's a fact. Pictures of the Central Canal. Indianapolis does a nice job of featuring that. Through Broad Ripple. The Wabash and Erie Canal, 1832, in northern Indiana. If you go up to Peru today, you can take a ride on a canal boat. They even have weddings and wedding receptions on there. Wouldn't be a big wedding, obviously, but it would be, or Delphi. I said, yeah, Peru. Thank you. It is Delphi. I think there's about a mile stretch in there that you can take a canal trip on. That's a picture of me, Chuck Hupert, Bob Schmidt, and Dale Cook, and that's Winston. April 22nd, 2010, the four of us took a hike tour out there. I couldn't have done this by myself. I needed a lot of help. And I always want to acknowledge the folks who helped me because they were immense help to me in putting all of this together. And I thank them. One last slide. When I was out at Jim Cunningham's property for the photographing the canal works, I saw something that I thought, wow. I took a picture of it. Not so effective today because of the time of year. But when I've given this program in the dead of winter in January and it's snowing, I show this picture and I close with it today.